The bar door creaked open that evening, letting in the cold autumn air and a small boy with a split lip. 40 bikers turned to stare at the child, standing alone in the doorway. His backpack was too heavy for his small frame, but his eyes held something heavier, a quiet determination that silenced the room. Nobody expected what would happen next, or how this single moment would expose a decade of corruption that had poisoned an entire town. When he finally spoke, his words changed everything. "They hurt my mom." From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing for more untold stories about redemption and justice. Sometimes the most powerful acts of courage come from the most unexpected places. The broken spoke stood at the edge of gristmill like an old scar, its neon sign flickering against the dusk sky. Inside, Thorne wiped down the bar counter with methodical precision, his weathered hands moving in the same pattern he'd used for 3 years since his release. Prison habits died hard. His eyes never stopped scanning the room, another habit that kept him alive during his 12-year sentence. Zephyr crouched near the ancient jukebox, tools spread around him as he coaxed life back into the machine. The music had died mid-song when someone selected Free Bird for the 3rd time that evening. Laszlo counted the night's earnings at a corner table, his arthritic fingers separating singles with military precision. The television above the bar murmured news that made the room grow still. Silas Merritt, former sheriff's deputy, released on parole after serving minimal time for misconduct in office. The camera showed him walking free, smiling at reporters. Thorne reached up and switched it off, the screen going black. The silence hung heavy until Riven broke it. "Thought he had 4 more years at least." "Money talks," Thorne replied, his voice carrying the gravel of someone who spoke rarely. "Always has in this town." The door creaked open, letting in cold autumn air. Conversation died as 40 pairs of eyes turned toward the entrance. A boy stood in the doorway, small against the darkness behind him. His split lip had crusted over with dried blood, and a bruise bloomed across his cheekbone. The backpack hanging from his shoulders seemed to weigh him down, but he didn't slump. His eyes, dark and solemn, scanned the room of leather-clad men without flinching. He walked straight to Thorne, his sneakers hardly making a sound on the worn floorboards. "They hurt my mom," he said, his voice clear and steady. "She said if anything bad happened, find the man with the white wolf patch." Thorne's hand moved reflexively to his chest, touching the faded emblem sewn onto his vest, a snarling white wolf with red eyes. Few people knew what it meant. Fewer still would send a child looking for it. Riven moved from the pool table, his hulking frame belying his gentle approach as he knelt to a boy's level. "Who's they, little man?" "My mom's ex, Silas, and his friends." The boy's composure cracked slightly, his lower lip trembling once before he mastered it. "He said nobody would help us because he owns this town." The name sent a current through the room. Bikers exchanged glances, hands tightening around pool cues and beer bottles. "Your mom," Thorne said carefully. "What's her name?" "Indigo. She works at the diner on Main." An image flashed in Thorne's mind, a woman with eyes that matched her name, serving coffee with her sleeves pulled down despite summer heat, concealing bruises he recognized all too well. He'd watched her for months, never speaking, something about her tugging at memories he'd buried deep. Danica appeared from the back room, her face softening when she saw the boy. The club's only female member, former military like many of them, she knelt and began cleaning his cuts with surprising gentleness. "My mom said you were good men," the boy continued, unflinching as antiseptic touched his wounds. "Said people misunderstand you." Something shifted in Thorne's expression. Recognition, pain, then resolve settling into the lines of his face. "What's your name, kid?" "Elian." "I'm taking you home. Your mother needs you tonight." Thorne's old truck rumbled through Gristmill's quiet streets. Residents pulled their curtains aside to stare, whispers following them like ripples in still water. Police Chief Calloway watched from his cruiser at the corner of Maple and Main, lifting his radio when he saw who drove past. They arrived at a small house with broken windows. Inside, Indigo lay on the living room floor, unconscious, her face swollen beyond recognition. Thorne checked her pulse, his movements efficient and careful. "What happened?" he asked, though he already knew. "Silas came by after work, said Mom needed to keep quiet about what she saw at the warehouse." Elian's voice remained steady, but his hands had balled into fists. Said next time he'd shut her up for good. Thorne tended to Indigo's wounds, called for medical help using a burner phone, and helped move her to the couch. Before leaving, he placed a bullet on the kitchen table. Old, tarnished. "Tell your mom when she wakes up. It's from '09. She'll understand." He promised to return by morning. As Thorne walked back to his truck, his hand brushed against a photograph partially visible in Indigo's damaged purse, a younger version of himself in military uniform, standing beside someone just out of frame. Dawn broke over the broken spoke as 40 motorcycles lined up in formation. Thorne stood before them, his face carved from stone. "This isn't club business. It's personal. No one has to ride." 40 engines roared to life in response. Vega, the club enforcer, pulled alongside Thorne. "You never told us what happened in '09. What's this really about, Prez?" Thorne's hands tightened on his handlebars until his knuckles turned white. "Some debts can't stay, buried forever." As the bikers thundered away from the lot, Indigo awakened in her small house, fingers closing around the bullet Thorne had left. Her eyes widened with recognition and fear. She pulled herself up despite the pain and limped to the bedroom, prying up a loose floorboard to retrieve a metal box. Inside lay newspaper clippings yellowed with age. The headline jumped out, "Local man sentenced to 12 years for wife's murder." The defendant in the grainy photo was unmistakably Thorne. "Elian," she called urgently, "we need to warn him. Silas knows who you really are. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up for what's right when everyone else looked away? Tell us your story of unexpected courage in the comments below, and subscribe if you believe in second chances." 40 motorcycles thundered through Gristmill's main street like a storm breaking. Residents emerged from shops and homes, some filming on phones, faces mixed with fear and something new, a cautious hope. The convoy rolled past the courthouse where justice had failed so many, past the police station where Calloway ruled like a small-town king. The bikers arrived at Silas's compound outside town, a sprawling ranch house with security cameras mounted at every corner. Men with shotguns appeared on the porch, faces hardening when they recognized their visitors. Inside, Silas paced before a wall of surveillance screens, phone pressed to his ear. "They're here, all of them. You said they wouldn't interfere." "They're just trying to scare you," Calloway replied, voice crackling through the speaker. "They know what happens if they touch you." He's got that look in his eyes, the same one from before. "Stay put. I'm 5 minutes out." Thorne dismounted, removing his helmet. 40 bikers remained seated, engines idling, a wall of controlled power behind him. He walked toward the house alone, unarmed. Silas emerged with a shotgun and 3 associates. The morning sun caught on his sheriff's department ring, a symbol of authority he'd never truly relinquished. "You have no idea what you're getting into, old man." Thorne stopped, his voice carrying across the yard with unnerving calm. "In 2009, you and Calloway took everything from me. Today, I'm just here about the boy and his mother. That waitress should have kept her mouth shut then, and she should keep it shut now." Thorne's eyes never left Silas as he spoke to the air. Vega, Danica, Riven. 3 bikers dismounted. What followed happened with military precision. Silas's men disarmed without a single gunshot fired. Glass shattered, fists connected with jaws. Silas himself tried to retreat inside, but Zephyr appeared behind him, having circled the property unseen. As chaos erupted outside, Thorne slipped through the house toward Silas's office. The place reeked of expensive cologne and cheap power. A memory flashed as he moved, himself in uniform, returning to Gristmill. Young wife waiting on the porch of their starter home. Another flash, working as a mechanic, hands clean of the violence he'd seen overseas. Then discovering something at a warehouse while fixing a delivery truck. His arrest. The gavel falling. 12 years gone. The office door yielded to skills learned in darkness. Inside, a laptop hummed on a mahogany desk. Beside it lay a flash drive labeled simply, "Insurance." Thorne worked quickly, finding files linking Silas, Calloway, and 6 town officials to an opioid distribution network. Among them, a report titled Civilian Witness Elimination, 2009, with Indigo's name partially visible beneath redacted text. A video file opened automatically. Security footage showed a warehouse interior. the same one where he'd been working that night. A younger Indigo in cleaner's coveralls appeared on screen, frozen in a doorway as two men stood over a woman's body. Thorne's face went pale as he recognized his wife. He pocketed the evidence, leaving behind the bullet from earlier, this time with a note. She wasn't the only witness. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Outside, townspeople had gathered beyond the property line, phones recording everything. Calloway's cruiser skidded into the driveway, the chief emerging with hand on his holstered weapon. "This is an illegal gathering. You're all under arrest for trespassing and assault." Thorne emerged from the house just as Calloway tried to handcuff Laszlo. Riven stepped between them, towering over the police chief. "You might want to check your friend's computer first." "What are you talking about?" Danica held up her phone, displaying an email address. "State police just received copies of everything. So did Channel 8 News." Calloway's face drained of color as Danica turned her phone to show the crowd the warehouse footage, though not the part showing the murder, just enough to reveal uniformed officers moving large packages of pills. "You think anyone will believe a bunch of criminals?" Calloway snarled, but his voice cracked. "Burn it down," he ordered his deputies, pointing at Silas's house. "All evidence of a drug operation. They must have planted it." In the chaos that followed, Silas slipped away through a back entrance. 3 bikers peeled off in pursuit, while Thorne realized what this meant. "Indigo and Elian," he said to Danica. "They're in danger." He mounted his bike and roared toward town, mind racing faster than his engine. At Indigo's house, he found the door splintered open, furniture overturned. A neighbor peered from behind a curtain across the street. "They took them," the elderly woman called out. "Back to where it all started," he said. "The old warehouse." Thorne's blood ran cold. The warehouse where his wife died, where everything began. Across town, inside the abandoned building that once housed Gristmill's largest employer, Silas paced before his captives. Indigo sat on a concrete floor, one eye swollen shut, her body between Silas and her son. 12 years I've kept this quiet," Silas muttered. 12 years building everything back up after your husband nearly ruined it all." "He's not my husband," Indigo said quietly. "No, but you wished he was, didn't you? Cleaning these floors at night, watching him from afar while he fixed the delivery trucks. Poor lovesick Indigo, keeping his secrets all these years." Elian remained surprisingly calm, eyes tracking Silas's movements like a predator studying prey. "My real dad will come for us." Silas laughed bitterly. "Your real dad has been right under your nose, kid, and he doesn't even know you exist." Outside, a motorcycle engine growled to a stop. Silas raised his weapon toward the metal door, just as it swung open. Have you ever witnessed a moment when truth finally surfaced after years of lies? Share your experience with justice delayed, but not denied. And subscribe to see the final confrontation that will change this town forever. Thorne stepped through the warehouse door into shadows that held too many ghosts. Light slanted through broken windows, catching dust motes that swirled like memories disturbed after years of stillness. Silas stood 20 feet away, weapon trained on the newcomer, while Indigo and Elian huddled against a concrete pillar. "Right on time," Silas said. "You always were predictable." "Let them go," Thorne replied. "This is between us." "You still don't recognize her, do you? After all these years?" Indigo raised her face to the light, one eye swollen shut, but the other locked on Thorne with an intensity that stirred something buried deep. "I was the cleaner that night. I saw everything." Thorne's eyes widened as recognition dawned. The quiet woman who'd cleaned the warehouse offices during his night shifts fixing delivery trucks. The only person who smiled at him without wanting something in return. "You witnessed it," he said softly. "Calloway and Silas murdered your wife when she discovered their operation. I was mopping the hallway. I heard everything." Her voice strengthened. "They framed you because you were an outsider, ex-military with a record of questioning authority. And you never came forward. They threatened to kill me if I spoke up." Indigo's good eye brimmed with tears. "When you went to prison, I discovered I was pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Thorne's gaze shifted to Elian, seeing his own features reflected back, the set of his jaw, the watchful eyes. "The bullet," he whispered, "from the scene." Indigo nodded. I kept it all these years, evidence they missed. I changed our names, moved across town. I was too scared then, but I made sure your son knew what kind of man his father really was." Silas laughed coldly. "Very touching. Unfortunately, none of you will leave here to tell this heartwarming story." As he raised his weapon, light suddenly flooded the warehouse. Phone flashlights appeared in every broken window. Dozens of gristmill residents who had followed the commotion, their faces pressed against the glass, devices recording everything. "Looks like your audience has arrived," Thorne said quietly. Silas spun in panic, realizing his confession had been broadcast live. "This changes nothing. It's my word against a convicted murderer." The warehouse doors burst open. State police officers poured in, weapons drawn, followed by news cameras. "Silas Merritt, put down your weapon. You're under arrest." Cornered, Silas swung his gun toward Thorne in desperate rage. The movement was a blur, Elian launching himself forward, small body colliding with Silas's arm just as the weapon discharged. The bullet shattered a window instead of finding its target. Thorne closed the distance in 3 strides, disarming Silas with practiced efficiency. As officers handcuffed Silas, Chief Calloway pushed through the crowd, face contorted with desperation. "These bikers assaulted a parolee and kidnapped—" "Chief Calloway," interrupted a state police captain, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder." The town watched in silence as both men were led away, 12 years of corruption crumbling in minutes. Later, at the police station, a veteran state investigator with salt and pepper hair recognized Thorne from their military days. "We've been building a case against corruption in this county for years," she explained. "Your wife's murder was the thread that started it all. The footage from today has over 1 million views already." Town officials hovered nearby, offering apologies and compensation. Too little. Too late. Thorne ignored them, focused only on the woman and boy seated across the room. His first private moment with his son came later, awkward and raw. They sat on a bench outside the station, neither knowing where to begin. "Mom made sure I knew about you," Elian finally said. "Said you were a hero who got punished for trying to do the right thing." "I'm no hero," Thorne replied. "Just a man who lost his way for a while." "Is that why you help people at the bar, to find your way back?" Thorne looked at his son with newfound wonder. "Something like that." 1 month later, the Broken Spoke had transformed. Half remained a bar, but the other half had become a community center where Indigo helped families affected by the county's corruption. Many bikers had their records expunged through the state's investigation, finding legitimate work for the first time in years. Danica led a women's self-defense class in what was once the pool room. Riven coached troubled teenagers in the parking lot, teaching them motorcycle maintenance instead of trouble. Laszlo, recognized at last for his military service, taught local history at the high school, his knowledge finally respected rather than feared. On a clear autumn evening, Thorne and Elian sat on the porch of their new home, tools spread between them as they restored a vintage motorcycle. "What does the white wolf patch really mean, Dad?" "It was my military unit symbol," Thorne explained. "We called ourselves the Wolves, protectors who operate in the shadows." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden carving, a wolf, weathered by years. "Your mother kept this all this time. I made it the day I met your birth mother, the day everything in my life changed." As Indigo joined them on the porch, Thorne took her hand gently. "You protected what mattered most when I couldn't. There's no debt between us, only family." The sun set over Grist Mill, casting long shadows that stretched toward a future rather than a past. In the yard, members of the Broken Chain MC gathered for a weekly barbecue, children playing between motorcycles that no longer frightened the town. On the living room wall hung a framed news headline. Bruised boy knocked on the biker bar door. What 40 bikers did next exposed decade of corruption. Beneath it, in Elian's handwriting, "Sometimes family finds you when you need it most." We all wear different patches in life, some visible, others hidden deep. Has someone unexpected ever become your protector or family when you needed it most? Share your story of found family in the comments and join our community of storytellers who believe that redemption is always possible, even in the most unlikely places.